Have you ever wondered why vintage lenses produce bokeh with a sharp, bright outline and most modern lenses don't? Well, obviously you have because you just clicked on this video. Duh. Well, what started out as an innocent comparison video of mine between a vintage Takumar lens and the Sigma art lens led me down a black hole of technical information that ultimately led to a revelation and discovery. I geeked out so much that a completely separate video spawned out of it, and it is the video you are watching right now. If this video is valuable to you, but Patreon is too much of a commitment, you can head over to the home page of my channel where you can leave a tip in the tip jar. If not, no worries, that's why YouTube is free. Thanks so much for considering. The 35mm f2 Pentax Super multi-coated Takumar that I used in this shoot renders very pleasing bokeh, but most instances it features the soap bubble bokeh effect, typical of vintage lenses of its era. The 18-35mm f1.8 Sigma art lens renders a predominantly even bokeh. Well, it turns out that this whole phenomenon is due to something called spherical aberration. Very common in vintage lenses. Spherical aberration describes the evenness of focus in an image, specifically between the edges of the lens and the center of the lens. So, a quick way to identify it besides bokeh is to ask, are the outside edges of a frame as in focus as the center of the image when objects are on the same plane? Let's look at this super boring shot of a wall. Zooming in about 500%, the center of the image is in focus. However, as we move to the outside, the image begins to soften and lose focus. It's a completely flat wall, and I'm standing perpendicular to it, so everything should be in perfect, even focus, but it's not. When we look at the Sigma, we notice it does a much better job of keeping everything on the same plane in the same amount of focus, regardless of where it is in the image. This is due to a lack of spherical aberration. Lenses are designed to bend light rays and place them on a fixed plane for focus. So we have our lens here. Light is coming in evenly, getting bent by the lens and projected onto a plane of focus. Anything that is in front or behind this plane of focus will be out of focus, and of course everything is on this plane will be in focus. A lens with absolutely no spherical aberration would bend every single light ray, no matter its original distance from the optical center of the glass, and make them converge on one fixed place, thus keeping everything in uniform focus. Let me find that card. There we go. So everything, no matter if it's from the outside edge or the center of the glass, is getting projected on the same point of focus. In other words, in our shot of the wall, the entire wall from the center to the edge would be in focus. In a shot with bokeh, the entire bokeh would be uniform and even in brightness, like this. Now, lenses with pronounced spherical aberration will bend light rays more pronounced from the edge of the lens compared to the center. So the center is casting the light rays properly on the plane of focus, whereas the light rays coming from the edge is getting bent more dramatically, and thus in the full spectrum of the lens, the light is being spread across the plane of focus. So the edges of the wall are rendered slightly out of focus compared to the center, and the light in the bokeh is gathered at the edge of the sphere more than the center. This is also why we can manually correct spherical aberration by closing down our aperture or using a higher f-stop number. See, this blocks the light from gathering or going through the edges of the lens, and it squeezes it all through the optical center, which tends to be more accurate in its focus, therefore aligning all of the light in the full image along the same focal plane. By closing down the aperture, you end up increasing your depth of field and getting more of the image in focus. So how does this affect bokeh? Well, think of it this way. Let's say we have a shot with a string of lights in the background that we want blurred out. Light is going to be bent by the lens in a way that it falls behind the plane of focus, something like this. Light coming in, being bent, landing behind the plane of focus. Here, with no spherical aberration, all of the light is going to land in the same spot in the plane of focus, and therefore your bokeh is going to be nice and uniform. With spherical aberration, however, if these particles are landing in a spread pattern, you're going to have differences in the smoothness or brightness within the bokeh. Overcorrecting will create the soap bubble look iconic of vintage lenses, where more light is being gathered towards the edge of the disc. Undercorrecting will concentrate the light towards the center of the disc, creating a very soft edge look to the bokeh. But there's one more trick up the sleeve of spherical aberration as it relates to bokeh. Because this is a result of the lens unevenly bending light as it relates to the optical center of the glass, where it gathers this light on the bokeh disc flip-flops depending on if it is in the foreground or the background of the image. Because most bokeh appears in the background, we associate soap bubble bokeh with vintage lenses, but in reality, vintage lenses produce both the soap bubble bokeh, which will happen in the background, and the soft edge bokeh, which will appear in the foreground. Take a look at this shot using the Takumar. The bokeh in the background has the sharp outline where light is being gathered towards the edge, but the bokeh in the foreground has the super soft outline and brighter center because the light is being gathered towards the center of the disc. This phenomena is less pronounced in the modern Sigma art lens because it has far less spherical aberration. It bends the light rays to a more fixed point than the Takumar, creating a more even bokeh in both the foreground and the background. Though most obvious in lights in a background, bokeh is present anytime a portion of your image is out of perfect focus. We can easily find it in characteristics in trees or other objects that render small areas of high contrast. Notice how the soap bubble ring bokeh effect is still present in these shots. There's a sharp high contrast outline present where objects are out of focus. The same shot using the Sigma loses this outline because this lens has less spherical aberration. Because bokeh is technically a rendering of focus, or more accurately, out of focus, I guess, spherical aberration will influence how your bokeh appears. Suffice it to say, the Sigma is doing a better job of bending all of the rays of light to point them on a consistent plane, whereas the Takumar is creating an uneven spread. This ultimately is a stylistic choice. There is nothing inherently good or bad about soap bubble bokeh compared to softer edged bokeh. One is smooth, the other is not. Though spherical aberration may be bending light rays inaccurately, it ends up creating an effect that can be quite beautiful and interesting to look at, so there is nothing inherently wrong with it. It's ultimately up to you which you like and which makes most sense to you to use in your video. Soap bubble bokeh is associated with an older, more nostalgic look because it was common in older lenses, and only in recent times have we been able to change it. But that does not make the new kid on the block better than the old guy. Well, I hope you've learned as much as I did when researching all of this and now understand what spherical aberration is and how it will affect your bokeh and your overall image. As always, I won't be seeing you in the next video, but you'll be seeing me. Awkward. If this video is valuable to you, but Patreon is too much of a commitment, you can head over to the home page of my channel where you can leave a tip in the tip jar. If not, no worries, that's why YouTube is free. Thanks so much for considering.